Good morning, everyone, from West Monroe, Louisiana, on my back porch. I'm excited to introduce to you Dr. Trey Mitchell. I got that wrong. Mitchell Davis. I'm sorry. Dr. Mitchell Davis.
I thought maybe my name had changed all of a sudden.
No, I've done so many of these now. They're beginning to blur. But I'm excited to introduce to you Dr. Mitchell Davis, who's assistant professor of music education at Northwestern State University. And he's going to give us a wonderful insight into why won't they perform the Christmas music. And I'm going to get out of the way and watch the chat. So vocal people, let's ask some questions. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Mitchell Davis.
Okay, good morning. Give me a second to start the presentation here. Okay, there we go. All right, so thank you all for joining me this morning for a discussion of the light and breezy topic of religion. And specifically, as you just heard, we're going to be talking this morning about how programming Christmas music in the public school setting can be problematic and what we can do about it. Now, I do need to preface all this by saying that I've designed elements of this presentation to be purposefully provocative to ensure that we touch on some of the challenging and uncomfortable issues that are often glossed over in discussions of this topic. So I encourage you to keep an open mind and to take note of your reactions and feelings about the things that I present. There will hopefully be time for us at the end to address and work through some of your specific feelings that you have during this session. I also encourage you to make use of the chat function throughout my talk to work through your thoughts as a group. But if you do elect to engage with me and with each other in that fashion, I just ask that you remain respectful of each other, of diverse perspectives, and of me. Thank you. Now, before we embark upon that journey together, I'd like to get a sense of your religious background. I mean, who all of you are. So I've set up a poll here I'm going to share with you. If I can find the little button that says poll, there it is. And in the poll, I'd just like you to indicate what religion you most strongly identify with. It's a long list. These are in order, the most popular religions in the world. Here we go. I guess I have to hit the publish button so you can see it. There we go. So now you should see the poll and go ahead and respond. Hopefully you're all finding the poll. So far I'm seeing 100% Christian. Give everybody another couple seconds to find it before we move on. All right, well, I'll leave that active if you haven't quite found it yet and you want to hit it later. It'll still be there, but we'll move on. I want to thank you all for sharing that information with me, and I'll actually tell you a little bit about my religious background in just a minute or two. Now, around this time every year, I start seeing posts popping up on music teacher social media boards like this. So I've been teaching for 23 years, and I have a first this year. I have a Jehovah's Witness in my class. She can't, and we'll come back to this idea of can't in quotes and why that's problematic, but she can't play the holiday music. Because of where I live, I have never programmed anything but Christmas music for the December concert. Any suggestions on what I should program this year and the next 3 after that, assuming she stays? Or this other quote, every year for the winter concert, I pick pieces that are not religious in nature, usually things like Let It Snow, Jingle Bells, Winter Wonderland, etc. This has worked fine in the past, but this year I have a beginning band parent who is refusing to let her daughter play Jingle Bells. Every time I feel as though I have this all figured out, there seems to be a family that ups the level of confusion and difficulty. And I've lifted these quotes from the band director's Facebook group, and of course the authors have been kept anonymous to protect their identities. Now, these frustrations are completely understandable, given that public school music programs started giving public Christmas concerts in the early 1900s. And for many Christians, or for many people, Christmas concerts are a beloved tradition that are looked forward to every year. And the frustration conveyed in these quotes likely stems from having to reconcile the uniqueness of a diversifying student population with the comfort of familiar traditions. And I think that that discord is a result of a number of misconceptions, such as why Christmas music is problematic in the first place, and for whom it is problematic, why people might resist participation in Christmas song, what even constitutes Christmas music, what the purpose of music education is, and who music education is for. And over the course of our time here this morning, we're going to focus, or we'll at least touch on each of these ideas. Now, Christmas concerts rose out of a belief that Christmas is universally celebrated and that it's woven into American culture. However, in reality, it's only a part of the American cultural experience for some Americans. According to the Pew Research Foundation, as of this year, nearly 30% of Americans don't identify as Christian, and members of that subset of the population have repeatedly raised opposition to Christmas music in public schools because it marginalizes and it's potentially harmful to religious minority students. And I'd like to illustrate this with a personal anecdote. I am Jewish. And there I am. There's a picture of me at my bar mitzvah with the rabbi. Though technically a man, according to Jewish law that day, it was just a couple years before my beard came in. But for this story, we're going to need to take a step even farther back to when I was in third grade. Look at me. I was so adorable. I don't know what happened. But that year, I failed music class. That's right. I, who would go on to be a music education professor, failed music. And I failed because I wouldn't sing the Christmas music. You see, as a young Jewish child, I felt like if I said the words, it meant that I believed what they meant. So it literally felt like I had to give up my Jewish identity in order to sing the songs. And there's a really interesting psychological phenomenon behind that reaction that folks who study religious identity formation have found, which is that young children don't actually understand the abstract idea of belief. For them, religious identity is defined by what they do, not what they believe, right? So Jews go to synagogue, Christians go to church, Muslims go to mosque. So actually doing something that is a unique activity associated with another religion for a young child is actually the same as subscribing to an alternate religious identity. And more than just failing the class, the experience, my little mouse isn't working, there we go. The experience left me feeling like an outsider. From my perspective, there was a right way to be that gave you access to the music making, and I wasn't it. It very clearly highlighted for me that I was different from everybody else and not in a good way. Now, it would be very easy for people to say to students like me, well, suck it up. And you'll have to imagine, for some reason, this picture didn't come up. It's a picture of a buttercup saying, suck it up, buttercup. It's a cute, funny little graphic. So picture it in your mind and chuckle. But it'd be easy to say, suck it up. It's just Christmas. Right? It's a beautiful holiday that most people in America celebrate. Just take part and enjoy the ride. And to illustrate why this isn't a great strategy, I'm going to ask you to step into the shoes of a religious minority student. And imagine that you were my student and I told you that we were going to put on a holiday concert. And in a second, I'm going to share with you a lyrics packet, but I don't want to sandbag you with the content. So let me preface it before I share it. The holiday concert will have 4 songs. 2 will be from the religious tradition of Satanism. 1 will be a popular song about the devil, and 1 will be a Christmas song, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Now, if you feel like you may be particularly sensitive to that content, you do not have to read the lyrics. The remainder of the session will totally make sense if you don't read it, though reading the sheet will help you experience what a religious minority may feel when faced with the prospect of Christmas song. Now, if you do choose to read the lyrics, what I'd like you to think about is try to identify what your reactions and feelings are as you read the lyrics, and try to see if you can figure out why you have that reaction. In addition, I'd like you to think about what other stakeholders might think or feel about this proposed concert. So people like students, parents, community members, administration, and why they might have the reactions that you think that they might. So here I'm going to go over here and I'll make this file live. It'll be in the files section. So here we go. So it's called Christmas lyrics sheet, even though the stuff in there is not necessarily about Christmas. I'll give you a minute or two to download that and read it. And I'll do my absolute best to do the hardest thing I find in teaching, which is to be quiet. So I'll start my little quiet clock now. I feel like I should have the Jeopardy theme song or something playing in the background while you do this. Oh, I just messed up not being quiet. Sorry. I'll let you concentrate. Okay, so hopefully you've had time to at least scan through there, and if you need to continue reading, that's okay. But as you read through the lyrics, you were probably struck by a number of gut reactions, feelings, thoughts, and emotions. And I need to say that those feelings are natural, and they're real, and they're valid. In the same way that someone else's feelings about Christmas music might be equally natural, real, and valid. Now, I think we can all agree that we would imagine that there would be some substantial resistance to a concert like the one I just proposed to you. And that oppositional reaction stems from issues of, let me get back to my slideshow. There we go. Issues of identity. And there are two main aspects of identity that are at play here. One is how we see ourselves, and the other is how we want others to see us. And how we react to things that are different from our own experience has to do with how much of a threat the thing that's different has to one or both of these aspects of our identity. Now, in some cases, in fact, in many cases, if we're talking about Christmas music, there will either be what's called a cultural match or no dissonance between the experience and identity. And what this means is that, that the personal beliefs, values, and behaviors of the person match the school expectations, or they're not in conflict with each other. In the case of the concert program that I just proposed to you a few minutes ago, or really a few seconds ago, we could see that someone who probably practices Satanism wouldn't have as much of an issue with the first two songs as someone who is Christian would. Also, someone for whom Satan does not feature in their religious beliefs would probably have less of an issue with the lyrics than someone whose religion casts Satan as an evil figure. And if we transition those ideas to Christmas music, right, folks who celebrate Christmas, who identify as Christian, or for whom the tenets of Christianity pose no threat to their own identity, those people will likely have few issues with performing Christmas music. Now, people like this have to adjust very little in order to participate in school activities. And this often for those students leads to easy success in school. And often teachers will see these students as the good students because they don't rock the boat. Now, some other people, on the other hand, will experience a cognitive dissonance, and that results from a cultural mismatch. And this means that the values, beliefs, and behaviors that are inherent to the activity are different from those that define the person's identity. Some of you may have experienced this feeling when you read the Satanism lyrics, or you could imagine how someone might feel that way. And when this happens, people feel pain at the prospect of having to adjust parts of their identity. And that pain comes from a feeling of having to denounce aspects of one's self. So for someone identifying as Christian, praising Satan means that they have to deny the part of their identity that believes that Satan is evil. And some of you may have experienced this as sort of a gut-wrenching physical pain, which is oftentimes how this manifests. In the case of Christmas music, someone who believes that Jesus is not the Messiah, that he is not the Son of God, and who may in fact believe that God is incapable of having a son, that person might feel that performing Christmas songs means going against their core beliefs. And these people then will often actively refuse participation because doing the action may carry with it the risk of losing belonging in the group that they identify with. You could imagine, for instance, if a Christian is seen singing songs out in public, praising Satan, that person would probably lose stature in the eyes of other Christians. In the same way, religious minorities may risk loss of belonging or diminished status in their own religious communities if they participate in song that is antithetical to their religious tradition. And the result of this is a very stark othering. So it becomes very obvious who is right, who is in the in crowd, and who isn't part of that rightness. And that othering is a very powerful force for a third group of people. And these people feel that dissonance between the activity and their identity, but they hide it and they participate anyway. So for these people, the values, beliefs, and behaviors that are inherent to the activity are still different from their identity, which, just like the last group of people, requires them to deny aspects of their identity to participate. However, these people will make those painful adjustments, and they do that out of a desire for acceptance, right? They don't want to be seen as a troublemaker or lose stature in their teacher's eyes. They don't want to be seen by their friends as the one who ruined everything for everyone, right? If we think about Christmas, there's a word for that. It's a Grinch, right? So students have to weigh sticking up for themselves against their friends, teachers, and community, labeling them as the person who stole Christmas, right? So also minorities often experience a state of fear when they stick up for themselves because, and we have to be real about this, America has a long history of discrimination, retaliation, and violence against outspoken minorities. There's a really harrowing story from a high school in Michigan, not really all that long ago, where the school had a Christmas tree prominently displayed in the school, and some parents complained, and the tree was taken down. And as a result, some members of the community came together and levied some real violence against that family. Members of their own community lashing out violently against them. So students may hide their dissonance so they don't rock the boat. Many minorities feel as though they just have to keep their head down and go with the flow and not draw attention to themselves. So it's important for us to note that even though minority students may be participating, they may still be feeling marginalized and be experiencing the pain of acting in opposition to their identity. There is also a fear of assimilation among minorities. And again, that fear is driven, we have to be real about it, by America's robust history of trying to assimilate minorities and rub out differences. There's often a message from those who are in authority that you have to look like us, speak like us, and act like us in order to succeed. And children are especially susceptible to this, right? They're so impressionable and they naturally want to fit in. In fact, this is why American Hanukkah looks like it does. American Hanukkah has taken on attributes of Christmas from a natural psychological desire to fit in. But in so doing, minorities risk losing the attributes of their identity that make them unique. For example, if Jews started extolling the virtues of Jesus, some of the core essence of Judaism gets eroded away. Now, to our credit, music education and education in general are recognizing these issues and are trying to do something about it. However, many of these solutions are imperfect, and they either don't address the underlying issues at hand, or they actually create some new issues of their own. The first of those solutions is to program non-religious music. But this really brings up the question of what actually is religious music, and for that matter, what is holiday music? In the academic conception of holiday songs, they tend to fall into two categories. The first is religious holiday music, and these songs overtly depict or represent the theological aspects of the holiday or the religion. The first two songs in the holiday program I proposed earlier serve this function, right? They are theologically tied to a belief about Satan. Christmas examples could include O Holy Night, Hark the Herald Angels Sing, and a ton of other ones, right? The other type of holiday songs are secular holiday songs, and these songs are either directly or tangentially related to the celebration of the holiday, but they contain no reference to the theology or the religion, right? The third song in the program I proposed earlier, Van Halen's Runnin' with the Devil, serves this function, right? We could absolutely anticipate or imagine that someone who is devoutly Christian would maybe have an issue with that song as well. Now, Christian examples of this might include Frosty the Snowman, Chestnuts Roasting on an Open Fire, and I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas. Though the songs aren't religious in nature, they still are Christmas songs. And a good test of whether a song is a Christmas song or not is to ask yourself if you would feel comfortable programming it on a May concert, or really any concert at a time other than Christmas. Would you feel comfortable? Jingle Bells tends to be a hot topic one. Would you feel comfortable programming Jingle Bells in February, at the end of February? There may still be snow on the ground. I mean, not here in Louisiana, but in other places of the country. There may still be snow on the ground at the end of February. But would Jingle Bells still feel right on February 27th? And if the answer is no, then it's probably a Christmas song, even if it's not a religious song. And the problem here is that religion, not really the problem, but the issue is that religion includes elements of both theology and culture, right? So minorities struggling to maintain their religious identity may still find that secular music poses a threat to their identity, right? If the minorities are being asked to take part in a celebration of a holiday that represents an antithetical belief, whether that celebration is religious or secular, it still may have the potential to erode their identity. So the next solution is allowing students to opt out from the songs that they're uncomfortable with. And this certainly removes the threat of the music to the student's identity, but it also carries some inherent problems. First, it excludes the student from valuable learning time. If there are 3 pieces on the concert and the student has an issue with one of them, and they opt out, then they're only getting 2/3 or 66% of the learning that their classmates are getting. Additionally, it creates a hierarchy of rightness, right? So in order to fully participate, you have to believe certain things. And if you don't, your wrongness acts as a barrier to being a full member of the learning community. It also makes a public example of any student who opts out, right? Everybody's going to know that that student isn't participating. They're going to know that that person is different, which brings about feelings of marginalization, potential for discrimination and violence, as we've talked about. And remember that those fears may drive students to participate, even if it's painful for them. And finally, it puts the burden on the student. And we have to remember that there is a power imbalance between teacher and student, between individual and institution. And we have to be aware of that, right? So putting this decision on the student essentially asks them to punch above their weight class. And while some might, others, again, will suffer in silence. And this is why I think it's really important for the school to take responsibility to proactively determine appropriate curricula, not putting the responsibility on the student to either opt in or opt out from it. Another solution is to have a holiday or a winter concert instead of a Christmas concert. And in this case, typically, right, Christmas songs are supplemented with songs from other traditions. And while this feels very inclusive on its face, it also has some real inherent problems. It can lead to a detrimental educational practice called mentioning, which is where the minority perspectives are really treated as an aside to the real story. It also can end up in the inclusion of only really like a cursory or superficial or a limited and isolated instance of a culture. And it can result in inequity, inauthenticity, and false equivalencies. And this is on full display in that concert program that I proposed earlier. I did that on purpose, right? So, but there were 3 songs that were related to Satan or the devil and 1 to Christmas. Also, the Satanism lyrics carry a lot more weight, both in number and in religious significance, than the Christmas song. Rather than feeling included, right, a Christian might actually feel pandered to in that instance. And the same is true of holiday concerts, where Christmas still features prominently, but it's supplemented with a couple other selections, often like a Hanukkah or a Kwanzaa song, which carry less weight and less prominence in the program. Compare, for example, O Holy Night and Dreidel Dreidel. Right? One details the night of the birth of Jesus, a huge figure in Christianity, and the other talks about a spinning top. It also carries a hidden message that Christmas, Hanukkah, and Kwanzaa are somehow related. Christmas is one of the biggest holidays for Christians, whereas Hanukkah is really just a very minor holiday for Jews, and Kwanzaa isn't even a religious holiday at all, right? It's a cultural holiday for African Americans. And I can tell you from my personal experience that it just feels like a token when someone wishes me happy Hanukkah, but they don't offer me any greetings for Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, which are our two biggest holidays. They just don't happen to fall during Christmas time, and so they don't get that recognition. And what it says to me is that someone didn't really take the time to learn who I am. Rather, they just want to see me through their own eyes. And it feels inauthentic. Remember that one of the tenets of culturally responsive teaching is that we truly care about our students and we take the time to really get to know them. So are you programming something about me to make yourself feel better, to check off your boxes, and to sort of make you feel justified in programming the music that you want to program for you? Or are you programming something about me for me, to make me feel validated, to make me feel valued, and in a genuine effort to try to include me in the learning community? Going even beyond that, a religion has to have something going on during Christmas time to even get a nod on the holiday program, right? So many religions don't even get included in being recognized and in having their holidays recognized in the program. Now, because of the potential in this kind of concert for mentioning to happen, and the strategy to not mention is to make sure that you learn a lot about who your students are and where they come from, I thought it would be fun to take a minute, because you should seize teachable moments when they occur, to teach you all a little bit about Hanukkah. And to do that, I'm going to turn the program over to TV's Mayim Bialik, and give me a second to pull up the video here. So she's going to give you a Hanukkah quiz, and feel free to play along in the video.
Hey Grockites, today we're gonna grok Hanukkah. Hanukkah's a Jewish holiday that happens every winter. Because Jewish people use a lunar calendar as opposed to a solar Gregorian calendar, which most of the world uses, the holiday tends to shift around. But just know that Hanukkah happens in the winter, okay? Okay. This year, Hanukkah starts on my birthday. What? People have a lot of misconceptions about Hanukkah, so here's a little quiz to help you figure it all out. Take the quiz and prepare to impress your Jewish and Gentile friends and family. Number 1, Hanukkah is Jewish Christmas. False! Since Hanukkah tends to fall right around Christmas, a lot of people think that it's the Jewish equivalent of Christmas. And it is a holiday with rituals and traditions, but it's actually not Jewish Christmas. Christmas celebrates Jesus being born in a manger, and because Christians believe that Jesus is the Son of God, it's a huge deal. It's the basis for redemption and salvation for millions of Christians all over the world. Hanukkah is about a group of Jews called the Maccabees defeating the Seleucid army in the 2nd century BCE, and it's detailed in the Apocrypha, not the Old Testament. It's also about a miracle where this oil that was supposed to last for 1 day lasted 8 days. And it's about defeating oppression and religious freedom and believing that what you believe in is worth your life. That's Hanukkah. It's not Jewish Christmas. Number 2, true or false? Hanukkah is a really big deal. False. I mean, it is, but it also isn't, technically speaking. You see, Jewish holidays are divided up into major holidays and minor holidays. Major holidays are things like Passover, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and some other really awesome holidays that you may have never heard of, like Sukkot and Shavuos. On major holidays, we refrain from things like using electricity, driving, writing, or working. But on minor holidays, you can drive, you can write, you can work, you can use electricity, because they're minor holidays. But Hanukkah's still fun, even though it's minor. We love Hanukkah. Woo! Minor holiday. Hanukkah. Number 3, Hanukkah involves tons of presents. 8 nights of presents. Guess what? False. Don't you get presents? You're probably thinking, I know Jews who get presents every night. Why don't you like presents? Everybody likes presents. Why don't you like presents? We like of course we like presents. Everybody likes presents. And a lot of families, you get things like pajamas, calendars, stickers, socks, chocolate coins, dreidels. It's just that Hanukkah is about so much more than the presents. It's about finding light in darkness. It's about facing adversity. It's about fighting for what you believe. It's also about lots of awesome Hanukkah jewelry. What? But mostly it's about those other things. Number 4, Jews eat super unhealthy food for 8 days of Hanukkah. True. Because the story of Hanukkah revolves around oil, we basically eat tons of food fried in oil. Like latkes or potato pancakes, they're these potato onion fritters, and they're amazingly delicious with sour cream or applesauce, or if you're in my family, ketchup. That's right, we eat them with ketchup because they're like glorified hash browns. Deal with it. We also eat jelly donuts fried in oil, or you can also make them without jelly like we do in my family. It's basically an 8-day festival of oily goodness. Yum! Number 5. Jews spin little spinning tops on Hanukkah. Oh, yes, we do. We do. Go dreidel. A dreidel is a 4-sided top that we play with at Hanukkah. And each side represents a letter that makes up a sentence, and it also represents an action that you take in the game of dreidel. It's a lot more fun than it sounds, I promise. The sentence that the dreidel spells is Nes Gadol Haya Sham, which means a great miracle happened there. But if you're in Israel, the dreidels say Nes Gadol Haya Po, which means a great miracle happened here. Dreidel is so much fun that I have an extensive dreidel collection. Number 6, Jews light a menorah on Hanukkah. True, but also not specific enough, so false. Haha, I gotcha. Menorah is actually the Hebrew word for candelabra. It's a general word. Chanukiah is the specific word for the 8-branched menorah, or candelabra, that we light on Hanukkah. We light 1 candle every night, increasing the light each night so that by night 8, all 8 candles are lit. And yes, there is a 9th branch called the shamish, which is used to light all the others. For your information, a menorah, which is used on Israeli money and described in the Old Testament, is a 6-branched candelabra with a 7th in the middle to light the others. So, if you've learned nothing else today, every Chanukiah is a menorah, but not every menorah is a Chanukiah. Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Merry Christmas, Happy Festivus, Happy Nothing. Whatever you want to do this winter, have a great time. Happy Hanukkah! Woo!
Okay, and we're back. There we go. So I just threw a whole bunch of stuff at you, and you're probably starting to feel the frustration that those teachers expressed in the quotes I used at the top of the session. And you might be thinking, but this is how we've always done it. Why do we have to make such big changes for just 1 or 2 students? And as Brian Wiedner points out in his article, Welcoming a Jehovah's Witness into the Band Room, we do it all the time. Right? We consider strong and weak players when we choose repertoire. We consider instrumentation when we choose repertoire. We incorporate students with physical disabilities and learning differences. Making our space accessible to students of various faiths should be just the same. And I highly recommend that you read that article. It is a beautiful piece written from a place of absolute compassion and warmth. It's available for free on the NAFME website. And I have it linked, listed in the references on the handout. Now, in truth, celebrating Christmas is not one of the National Core Art Standards, nor is it one of the Louisiana standards. Nothing in our curriculum dictates the celebration of the holiday as an important curricular component, or really the celebration of any holiday, for that matter, as an important curricular component. We do need to be mindful, though, of the prominence of sacred music in our canon. Right? As it says in the NAFME position statement on sacred music, the omission of sacred music from the school curriculum would result in an incomplete educational experience. And this is true, but we need to be mindful of the difference between performing and learning about. Whereas performing is celebratory, it carries a message of belonging, it views the repertoire as more than just art, and it can indoctrinate students into ways of being that are not their own. Learning about is objective. It provides context for understanding. It views the repertoire for its artistic value, and it preserves individuality. For example, I found it really interesting to learn about Viking human sacrifice practices when I watched the TV show Vikings. But I don't want to participate in a human sacrifice ritual, right? I can learn about it and be interested in it and retain the safety of my identity. But participating means that I would have to deny many things that I believe about the sanctity of human life. And so it's important to include music from a variety of cultures and religions in our curricula. Of course it is. But we have to be careful about how we do it so that the repertoire doesn't pose a threat to students' identity. Now, you're probably saying, Mitch, all this sounds well and good, fine, right? But can you tell me what to do so that I can ensure my students' safety while still teaching a comprehensive music curriculum? And the answer is, well, kind of. Religion is a very individual construct. Each person expresses their religion differently. For example, my brother and I grew up in the same house with the same parents and are less than 2 years apart in age. And yet, he and I couldn't disagree more on the December dilemma. So the answer is really that you need to get to know your students. And there are some basic questions that you can ask your students to inform your repertoire choices. And these also come from Brian Wiedner's article. And those questions are, can you explain your faith to me as you practice it? Who should I talk to about questions that I may have about your faith and how it relates to our class? What concerns do you have about music that we might perform? Can you give me examples from your past music education? Ooh, that's the end of that slide. I'll go back here. If you ask these questions proactively before you start to program your repertoire, you have a much better shot at programming music or selecting music that will be equally or equitably as meaningful for each and every one of your students, instead of sort of shooting to the middle and ignoring the people on the outsides. It's also important for us to get to know ourselves, right? Find out where our implicit biases lie. And this is a term that's come up a number of times across the conference so far. And what ways you might have formed misconceptions about other religious groups. And some questions you might want to spend some time considering are, how frequently and what types of interactions did I have with individuals from backgrounds different from my own growing up? Who were the primary persons that helped to shape my perspectives of individuals from different groups? And how were their opinions formed? Have I ever harbored prejudiced thoughts toward people from different backgrounds? I'm going to turn my camera off so I'm not on top of the next question or two. If I do harbor prejudiced thoughts, what effects do those thoughts have on students who come from those backgrounds? And do I create negative profiles of individuals who come from different backgrounds? And these questions can be used equally when you're thinking about your relationship, not just with people from different religions, but also people with from different nationalities, ethnicities, races, anything where somebody is different from you. The same set of guide questions is equally helpful. Now, oops, that's not what I want. Turn me back on so you can see me. There we are. There's been a theme running through many of the great sessions of this conference so far, and that is diversity, equity, and inclusion. By seeking answers from the questions that I propose that we ask of our students and of ourselves, we should endeavor, come on, next slide, there we go, to empower all students without denigrating any of them. We should place individual worth and dignity above an approximation of what's good for a group. We should we should teach knowledge within its context instead of treating it as absolute. And in so doing, we can give each student's perspective equal value, which will lead to a more free exploration and willingness to experience others' perspectives. The last point from the previous slide is really important, that each student needs to feel valued for who they are, right? They need to feel that their identity is safe before they're willing to step outside themselves to experience someone else's perspective. And this goes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Safety first. If that journey feels like a perilous one in which their identity is danger, students won't take it. And Carlos Abril, in his article, and this is in the references as well, talks about this being on a continuum from cultural validation to thoughtful valuation. The idea being that we need to spend equal time making students feel like their perspective is valid and respected, as well as time helping students learn about other perspectives. And NAFME provides some guidance for us in doing that. So they ask us to consider, is the music selected on the basis of its musical and educational value rather than its religious context? Does the teaching of music with sacred text focus on musical and artistic considerations? Are the traditions of different people shared and respected? Again, I'm going to turn me off for just a second so you can see the remaining questions. Is the role of sacred music one of neutrality, neither promoting nor inhibiting religious views? Are all local and school policies regarding religious holidays and the use of sacred music observed? Is the use of sacred music and religious symbols or scenery avoided? Is the performance in devotional settings avoided? Is there sensitivity to various religious beliefs represented by the students and parents? Oops, and that was the end of that one. And finally, I will ask you to consider that the decisions we make in our curricular design matter, that there are real consequences. Oops, I'll turn me back on so you can see me. There we go. There are real consequences, both positive and detrimental to our choices. And so I implore you to think about the answers to the following questions with regard to any repertoire that you choose. Does my decision reflect the purpose of my class? What is gained as a result of my decision? What is lost as a result of my decision? Who benefits from my decision? And who is hurt because of my decision? And did I choose the best option to accomplish my goals? For me, as a teacher, if there is anything that I do in my class that has the potential to cause any avoidable harm to even a single student, that's a choice that I need to seriously revisit and revise. And that's because I believe that every student is entitled to the same high quality, rigorous music education as their peers, regardless of their family background, social class, race, ethnicity, religion, native language, gender, and really any other identifying characteristic. Now, I'm sure that this session has left you with more questions than answers, and hopefully, though, it gave you food for thought. I'm sorry that because of the platform that we're working with, that we couldn't engage in a back and forth discussion, which is really how I like to do this session, because I'm sure each of you are having some unique thoughts and reactions to this material that would require some, or that could use some specific feedback. So if you're interested in engaging in some kind of dialogue about this important issue, I'm certainly happy to do that. Feel free to contact me. My contact information is on the handout. And certainly if enough people want to engage in some sort of open roundtable discussion, maybe we can set up a Zoom chat at a later date to flush out this issue in more depth and deal with some of the specific concerns, questions, and ideas that you are all having. Now, I hope you all have a great rest of the conference, and if you celebrate it, I hope that you have a good Thanksgiving. And it looks like we have just a couple minutes. If folks have put some questions in the chat here, I'll open up the chat and see what's going on there.
There hasn't been any questions, just comments. I'm not seeing any questions. If anybody wants to drop a question in the chat, we have probably a couple minutes to deal with.
feel free to drop a question in the chat. Anything specific about maybe your experience with your students, students that you've had trouble, or not, I don't want to say trouble, but just had to struggle with figuring out, how to make the learning, how to include them in learning. We can certainly workshop that a little bit here in the last couple minutes. But if
I've got one for you, Mitch.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So a local instrumental instructor had a student in his ensemble that stated he could not play a piece of music because the metronomic marking was marked spooky.
Yeah. One of the things that we have to remember, one of the things that we have to endeavor to do as teachers is to see students' concerns from their perspective and not ours. Right. So in my perspective, I don't see spooky as an issue. But, my first question to that person would be, did you ask that student why spooky was an issue? Right. It's probably not that their tradition says stay away from spooky. Right. Their tradition probably has some sort of tenet or belief that spooky is an instance of that it crosses that boundary. And by understanding not just that we need to stay away from spooky, but that we just need to be mindful of this perspective. It'll help the teacher make decisions about, anything that could be in that realm, and maybe ways to, do some accommodations, that could deal with that. As far as, a specific answer to that question is hard to do. Like I said earlier in the presentation, everybody's religious perspective is different. And so without more information from that particular student and that particular context, it's hard to say specifically what that person should do, other than, I think the first time, and this isn't just a religious issue, it's an anything issue. Whenever we have an issue with a student, the first thing we should do always is ask a question. If it's a behavior issue, if a student is, acting out in the back of the room, just telling them to stop acting out, it may solve the problem for, right now for the next couple seconds, but it hasn't addressed the underlying issue. And so by asking questions, we can get at the heart of what's really going on, which I think informs us to be able to do more meaningful and productive and proactive things to address all students.
Well, we do have one question from Elisa.
Yeah.
It says, have you had any musical experiences in public school that made you feel seen and included? And we have just a few minutes left, so this will probably be the last question.
Goodness. As far as being seen and included for being Jewish, the fact that I'm struggling to think of one is sort of highlighting, indicative of the issue. Anytime that I can think of in my mind where I have been included because on the basis of being Jewish, it has been, I guess, under the pretext of Christmas, right? So Christmas is happening, so let's include people who are Jewish. I can't remember ever having, a holiday like Purim, which is a great holiday. It's Purim is our costume holiday. We get dressed up in costumes, and there's candy, and there's all sorts of like fun stuff that goes on. There's Sukkot, which is our harvest festival, and it's a really beautiful holiday of eating foods that are in season, and you spend a week living outside or sleeping outside, so that you're sort of like reconnecting to. There's all these great, rich Jewish traditions. And I, in my memory, the only Jewish thing that has ever really been included in my experience was Hanukkah, which, as we talked about, is look, as Maan Bialik said, we love Hanukkah. Hanukkah's great, but it's not the hallmark of our religion in the same way that Christmas is the hallmark of Christianity. And so, it sort of pains me a little bit it's a good question. It pains me a little bit to think about it that way, but no, I don't think from a structural standpoint. Of course, my friends, I surround myself with people who I value and who value me. is much more open and sharing that way. But from a structural schooling standpoint, it was always, I always had to take off school. I had to, take days off of school to observe my big holidays. And my teachers were always like, oh, what are we going to, and now he has to make up all the tests and he has to this, that, and the other thing. And, it was, yeah. So I guess the sad answer to that question is no, unfortunately.
Well, thank you so much for this wonderful session, vocal people and instrumental people. If you do want to connect with Dr. Mitchell Davis, please look at the handout and contact him. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending this session.
Yeah, I would like to echo that. Thank you all for being here.